Parashat Shelach Lecha. The episode of the spies has puzzled commentators for centuries. How could have they got it so wrong? The land, they said, was as Moses promised. It was indeed flowing with milk and honey, but conquering it was impossible. The people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of the giants. We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. All the people we saw are of great size. We saw titans there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we seemed in theirs. They were terrified of the inhabitants of the land, and entirely failed to realize that the inhabitants were terrified of them. Rahab, the woman from Yericho, tells the spies that had been sent by Joshua a generation later, "I know that the Lord has given you, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. Our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage fell because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above, and on the earth below." The truth was the exact opposite of the spies' reports. The inhabitants feared the Israelites more than the Israelites feared the inhabitants. We hear this in the start of the story of Bilam. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified because there were so many people. Indeed, Moab was filled with dread because of the Israelites. How did the spies err so egregiously? Did they misinterpret what they saw? Did they lack faith in God? Did they more likely lost faith in themselves? The question was asked by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He asked the obvious question: how could 10 of the spies return with a demoralizing, defeatist report? How could they say we cannot win? The people are stronger than us. Their cities are well fortified. There are giants and we're grasshoppers. They had seen with their own eyes how God has sent a series of plagues that brought Egypt, the strongest and the most long-lived empire in the ancient world, to its knees. They have seen the Egyptian army with their cutting-edge technology, the horse-drawn chariot, drown in the Yam Suf, while the Israelites passed through on dry land. Egypt was far stronger than the Canaanites, Jebusites, and the Perizzites, and the other minor kingdoms that they would have confronted while conquering the land. Nor was it an ancient memory. It happened only 1 year before. What is more is that they already knew that. Far from being giants confronting grasshoppers, the people of the land were terrified of the Israelites. They had said so themselves in the course of the song at the Red Sea. The people have heard. They tremble. Trembling seized the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan will melt away. Terror and dread will fall on them. The people of the land were terrified of the Israelites. Why then were the spies afraid of them? Not only that, these people were not just random people from the population. The Torah states that they were all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. They were leaders. They were not people who give lightly to fear. The questions are clear and straightforward, but the answers that the Rebbe gave were unexpected. The spies were not afraid of failure, he said. They were afraid of success. What was their situation now? They were eating manna from heaven. They were drinking water from a miraculous well. They were surrounded by clouds of glory. They were camped around the sanctuary. They were in continuous contact with the Shekhinah, with God. Never had a people lived so close to God. What would their situation be if they entered the land? They would have to fight battles, maintain an army, create an economy, farm the land, worry about if they have enough rain to produce crops, and all the other distractions for living in the world. But what would happen to their closeness to God? They would be preoccupied with mundane material pursuits. They can spend their entire lives learning Torah, lit by the radiance of the divine. They will no longer be that nation among all the other nations. There, they will be one of other nations, with the same kind of economic, social, and political problems that every other nation has to deal with. The spies were not afraid of failure. They were afraid of success. Their mistake was a mistake of very holy men. They wanted to spend their lives in the closest proximity to God. But did they not understand that God seeks, in the Hasidic phrase, in the dwelling in the lower worlds? Of the great differences between the Judaism and other religions is while others seek to lift people to heaven, Judaism seeks to bring heaven down to earth. Most of the Torah is about things that are not conventionally related to religion at all. Labor relations, agriculture, welfare provisions, loan, debts, land ownership, and so on. It is not difficult to have an intense religious experience in the desert. Most religions have holy places and holy people who live remotely. far removed from the stresses of everyday life. But that was not the Jewish project, the Jewish mission. God wanted the Israelites to create a model society where human beings are not treated as slaves, where rulers are not worshipped as demagogues, where human dignity was respected, where law was impartially administered, to the rich and to the poor alike, where no one would be abandoned to isolation, where no one was above the law, and there's no area of moral-free zones. That requires a society, and a society requires a land. It requires an economy, an army, fields and flocks, and labor and enterprise. All these in Judaism become ways of bringing the Shekhinah into the shared spaces of our collective life. So spies feared success, not failure. It's a mistake of deeply religious men, but it's still a mistake. That is the spiritual challenge of the greatest event in 2,000 years of Jewish history. The return of the Jews to their land, to the land of Israel. Perhaps never before and never since had there been a political movement accompanied by so many dreams as Zionism. For some, it was a fulfillment of the prophetic vision. For others, it was a secular achievement of people who decided to take history in their own hands. Some saw it as a connection to land and soil, others in assertion of power and will. Some saw it as a refuge from European anti-Semitism, others as a first flourishing of the Messianic age. Every Zionist thinker had his own version of utopia, and to a remarkable degree, they all came to pass. But Israel was always something simpler and more basic. Jews have known virtually every fate and circumstance, between tragedy and triumph. In almost 4,000 years of our history, we have lived in almost every land on earth. But in all that time, there only ever was one place where we could do what we were called to do from the dawn of our history, to build our own society based with our highest ideals. A society that will be different from our neighbors and become a role model. How a society, an economy, an education system, administration of welfare could become vehicles for bringing the divine presence down to earth. It is not difficult to find God in the wilderness. If you do not eat from your labor, and if you let God fight your battles. 10 of the spies sought to live that way forever, but that is not what God wants from us. He wants us to engage in the world. He wants us to heal the sick, feed the hungry, fight injustice with all the power of the law, and combat ignorance. He wants us to show what it is to love our neighbor and the stranger. Jewish spirituality live in the midst of our lives, the life of society and its institutions. To create it, we have to battle with two types of fear. Fear of failure and fear of success. Fear of failure is common. Fear of success is rarer, but not less debilitating. Both come from the reluctance to take risks. Faith is a courage to take risks. It is not certainty. It is the ability to live with uncertainty. It is the ability to hear God saying to us what He said to Abraham, "Walk on ahead of me." The Rebbe lived what he taught. He sent emissaries to virtually every place on earth where there is Jews. In so doing, he transformed Jewish life. He knew he was asking his followers to take risks by going to places where the whole environment would be challenging in many ways, but he had faith in them, and in God, and in the Jewish mission, whose place is the public square, where we share our faith with others and doing so in practical ways. It is challenging to leave the desert and go into the world, with all its trials and tribulations, but that is where God wants us to be, bringing His Spirit to the way we run their economy, a welfare system, a judiciary, a health service, an army, healing some of the wounds of the world, and bringing to places often shrouded in darkness, fragments of the divine light, and healing the fractured world. Shabbat Shalom.